Welcome back, episode 14 of The Morning After. Wow, what a wild week it was in the NFL, in college football, and now we get to break it all down. I appreciate you all spending some time with me on this fine morning, the morning after week 17 in the NFL, and the morning after, or I guess I should say, 2 mornings before the college football playoff, and also 2 mornings before 2026. This will be our last show in 2025. It's been, honestly, I remember when I started this right after football season, and I thought to myself, man, if I can just get through the new year and get this thing off the ground and stay consistent and record an episode every week and put out good content and create the newsletter and get the YouTube channel up and running. And it was always New Year's Eve 2025 at the end of the year was kind of the site that I had set of the first checkpoint to see how I did with this venture. And I would say so far so good. Obviously, you, the audience, can have your feedback as well. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the YouTube channel or the newsletter, we've got a lot more growing to do. But I would say the first 3 months of this experiment has been awesome. Again, this is episode 14, so it's been about 3 months straight of doing one episode every week. I remember when I started, it was live on Monday mornings, and then I realized, you know what, it's called The Morning After. I probably should have it ready to go by Sunday night, and then after a few live episodes, which I'm going to try to get back to do some live episodes, maybe during March Madness, maybe after football season. I might do some more different types of content once I have some room to breathe. But we'll keep this same format at least through the NFL postseason over the next 6 weeks or so until we get to the Super Bowl. But yeah, it's been a fun journey so far. I've got some intention setting to do for 2026. I have not yet set my goals yet in stone, personally, professionally. And I recommend all of you do that because I think obviously it's just a different day, different year on the calendar, but there is some intention about the new year that I really enjoy, and you can look back at what you accomplished over the year and be proud, and realize that there's always room for growth, and that's where I'm at here with this podcast and with my life as we wrap up the year, hopefully in style. The NFL was styling, man. What an awesome week it was in the NFL. I actually didn't run the favorites to see how the favorites did this week. We just wrapped up Sunday Night Football. Man, what a wild game between the Bears and the Niners. So coming up on this show, we'll obviously do all of the recaps for Week 17 in the NFL, and we'll spin things forward to Week 18. Obviously, a bit of a weird week with all of the games taking place on Saturday and Sunday, no Monday Night Football. And, of course, with the last week, all the playoff implications and what that means for the seeding and all that stuff. We'll get to all that a little bit later in the show. It looks like favorites went 9-6 against the spread this week, which isn't bad. Listen, favorites, they kind of hit a little bit of a dip earlier in the year. But overall this season, it's been a really good year for favorites. Let me redo my chart here. Yeah, about a little over 51%. So, that's the underdog. Favorites a little bit under. How about that? Favorites under 500 on the year. 48%. That was actually underdogs that went 9-6 this week. I had the wrong check mark flipped. It's actually been a good stretch for underdogs in the NFL over the last few weeks. That's for damn sure. So definitely something to keep an eye on as we get closer to postseason. Yeah, how about that? So if I actually do the real world here, so this is when you're doing a podcast and you just things slip through the cracks. Underdogs actually have only had one sub 500 week since week 10. In week 15 they went 7-9. Every other week since week 9, they've been above 500. The last sub 500 week, like really bad sub 500 week, was week 8 when favorites went 2-11. But how about that? Since week 9, it's been pretty much all underdogs all the time. The underdogs have struck back. Underdogs are 77-56-1, which is 58% since week 9. So the dog days of the NFL, right? The first 8 weeks of the season, first half of the season was pretty much all chalk, and then we saw a huge flip right around midseason. And since week 9, it's been pretty much all doggies. As favorites, again, below 500 in the NFL this season. After week 8, I would never would have guessed that, considering how good the chalk was performing. I'm sure the sports books are loving it as well. So another good week for underdogs. Favorites continue to struggle. Let's take a look and see how unders did this week, or overs, I guess, depending on which side of the lens you want to look at. If I recall, overs were doing pretty well over the last few weeks. So overs this week went just 6 and 9, with, of course, one game pending tomorrow. For the season, overs are 132, 122, and 1, which is about 52%. So, again, not profitable, but it's been pretty much a coin flip on both sides of the totals this year. Same thing with the favorites and the dogs. Again, after the chalk started so hot, you would think that the regression would happen. I was not so sure, just because I think the quarterback play in the NFL has gotten so bad. But that's the point spread is a great equalizer, right? The favorites get priced up so much that they really only have one direction to go. And the dogs have definitely performed well over the back half of the year. Before we get started in the NFL recap, I just want to give a shout out to Phillip Rivers. This is my favorite story in the NFL this year. It really is. Obviously, the Colts lost again today, but the Rivers story is, to me, a lesson in perseverance, a lesson in overcoming fear, and a lesson in regret, especially the last one. I was watching an interview of his, and he was talking about why he made the decision to come back. And he said 2 reasons. One, I wanted to teach my kids and also my players, he coaches high school football, a lesson in not being afraid. And also, for me personally, I knew if I didn't come back, I would always regret it. And that line really stood out to me, because how often are we faced with a decision in our lives, and the easy way, right, the way that is within our comfort zone is the choice we make. And we don't decide to leave our comfort zone. We don't decide to really push our limits because we're afraid of failing. We're afraid of looking stupid. Whatever the reason is, we're just afraid, period. It's fear. And the ability to overcome that fear and to push yourself out of your comfort zone, that is where you truly grow as a human. And I respect the hell out of that decision, because a lot of people, including me, were kind of ridiculing it, right? Like, it was a punchline. Like, here comes old man Rivers, 44 years old, coming back into the NFL. And let's be honest, he hasn't looked great. I think he's looked better than expected, but the expectation was so low. That was a very low bar. He's held his own. I mean, he really has. And he's played and performed a lot better than most 44-year-olds would perform in that situation. And I think it's because of just how mentally strong he is. I think physically, his body is obviously not ready for what it's not meeting the expectation of what he probably needs in order to be successful. But his mind and his resolve, stronger than ever. My favorite story in the NFL this year. It's not going to end well. Obviously, they're going to miss the playoffs and he'll retire. But probably my favorite story of the entire sports year. Not just the NFL, just sports in general. Because I think it's just such a great life lesson, again, about fear and regret and how you should never, right, leave it all out on the field. Philip will never have any regret about how he went out. And that's because he was courageous enough to take a step out of his comfort zone. I mean, he was living a pretty good life. Down in Alabama, high school football coach, very successful. No reason to risk life and limb and embarrassment and reputation to go play in the NFL. And you know, it was a long shot anyways that the Colts were going to get into the playoffs just because of how dire their situation was. It wasn't just Rivers. It was, the secondary was all banged up. Like, just everything was kind of, trending down. And, man, he stepped up when the Colts needed him to. And best story in the NFL this year. So salute Phillip Rivers. Not quite Morning Glory, because that's kind of an actionable element we'll give you later in the show. I do have a pick for you for Morning Glory. But the the hero award, the first annual morning after hero award, if there is such a thing. The medal of courage for the morning after goes to Philip Rivers for my favorite story of the year here in 2025. All right, let's go through week 17 in the NFL. We'll make some upgrades. We'll make some downgrades. We'll start with the Christmas games on Thursday. Commanders lose to the Cowboys by a touchdown. They actually covered the spread. Spread got stretched out to, I think, 9. And Washington did cover. How about this? They gained 8 yards per play. I mean, they were moving it against Dallas's defense, but they were a -5 in net success. They were not great on third downs, not great in the red zone, and Dallas held on to win it. Not really much there, frankly. I actually wouldn't upgrade or downgrade either team. I think Josh Johnson, I think you've pummeled that Washington rating enough with him. And again, 8 yards per play. It wasn't like he was terrible. And the Cowboys, if you're giving up 8 yards per play to the Commanders and Josh Johnson, there's no way I'm going to upgrade you, especially if you didn't cover the spread. Vikings beat the Lions as a big dog, touchdown, I think, plus dog. I think it might have closed right at 7. Minnesota gained 3.2 yards per play. 31% success rate. Why did they win by 2 scores? Because they were +6 in the turnover margin. The Lions turned it over 6 times. Obviously, big downgrade for Detroit, upgrade for Minnesota as much as we possibly can, upgrade Max Brosmer. I don't know what's happened to the Lions this year. They seem to be a shell of their former selves. It looks like the offensive line and the defense, even though their defense was fine, 3.2 yards per play allowed, they just got bullied. They got bullied by Flores and that defense and that blitz rate, really got to Goff, and he obviously was very flustered. He got sacked 5 times. But we'll see. Detroit can keep Chicago out of the 2 seed this week with their game against the Bears in a rematch of a game where the Lions won, I think, by like 30+ earlier this year. It was a big blowout. It was week 2, actually. I was doing the research, then I was week 2, and the Bears were 0-2 after that game. Man, both teams have gone in different directions since then. Thursday night, Chiefs covered, but lost the game to the Broncos. It was a very lackluster performance. I actually forgot to put in my success rate numbers in that game. Denver did win net yards per play +1, 4.3 to 3.3. Let me see. I actually forgot to put the success rate numbers in there. So I do this thing where I do a graph, I do a chart every week where I have all the success rate and the yards per play and everything. Yeah, Denver really dominated the game, plus 20% net success. And yeah, pretty impressive performance by Denver. They just couldn't cover the spread. Defensively, they did a really good job. Obviously, the Chiefs with Chris Oladokun was not great. I think it was the turnover, actually. Kansas City, that's why they covered. Kansas City +1 turnover margin. I believe they turned it into a touchdown, and that was really the difference in the game and why they were able to cover. Arizona at Cincinnati, big win for the Bengals. They won the box score. Joe Burrow looked like Joe Burrow. Their defense actually played well. They held the Cardinals in check. We lost our Jacoby Brissett passing attempts prop by 1. We went over 37.5, and he landed 37. That's the kind of year it's been for me betting the NFL. I have had so many hook losses, bad beats. The Rams-Eagles game when we had the Rams and they blocked the field goal return for a touchdown. Like, that's the kind of year it's been for me betting the NFL. I could complain, I could whine, but I also could take solace in the fact that my process has been good. My process was great with the Jacoby Brissett bet. I was totally fine with that process. It should have worked out. The process played out perfectly. The bet played out perfectly. They had a second and goal late or second down late, and they ran it instead of threw it, and then he ended up getting sacked and didn't get 2. I needed 2 more. I needed 3 more attempts, and they had a new set of downs on the last drive of the game. They passed on first down, ran on second down, and then threw a touchdown on third down. So I fall 1 short. That's the way it works. Gambling can be tough sometimes. Even when you make the right bet, sometimes it's the wrong result. Saturday night, Baltimore went into Green Bay and won by 17. The Packers actually gained over 8 yards per play in the game. They were really moving it in that game. I feel like I might have been off with that. 8 yards per play feels like a lot. Did I pull from the wrong column this week? Did the Packers really gain? I might have pulled from yards per pass. I apologize if I did. No, they really gained 8.2 yards per play. Holy moly. How the hell did the Packers only score 24 points, gaining 8.2 yards per play? Oh, I know why, because they turned it over twice and they went 1 for 2 in the red zone. Baltimore ran it all over Green Bay. And now with the loss to the Steelers, the Browns, beating the Steelers, Baltimore's got a chance to win the AFC North. We'll get to that game in a little bit. In the battle for the number 1 pick, the Giants beat the Raiders. The writing was on the wall earlier in the week when the Raiders benched Max Crosby and Brock Bowers and Jeremy Chin because of injuries. Shut all 3 of them down. And I said on last week's show, tanking is not done during the game. The players do not care who has the number 1 pick once the game starts. Tanking is done during the week. They want to get this backup player some run. This starting player is a little bit banged up, but he could play through it. But the team sits him. And then Max Crosby throws a hissy fit on his way out. Just a disastrous situation for the Raiders. Although, if the goal was to get the number 1 pick, then it worked out perfectly because they showed nothing in this game. They lost the turnover margin. They were minus 16 net success against the Giants offense that has been terrible all year with Jackson Dart. And the Raiders are a disaster. I would say they're the worst team in the NFL outside of the Jets or the Titans. Houston on Saturday beat the Chargers by 4. They were a slight dog in that game. Game stayed under. We hit our Chargers team total under, one of my bigger bets of the weekend. Houston won net yards per play. They won success rate. They sacked Herbert 5 times. Their defensive line was dominant against a very bad Chargers offensive line. Houston is legit, people. I think they might be the next best team in the AFC outside of the Bills. Honestly, it could be Bills, Ravens in terms of the rating, if Lamar Jackson's healthy, and Texans as your top teams in the AFC. I know the Patriots certainly feel like they're deserving. So do the Broncos, but I don't know. The Texans, to me, were a team coming into the year that a lot of people expected to win the Super Bowl. They started 0-3, and then they were off everyone's radar. And they just kept stacking wins. And now here they are. I believe they're at 11 They're 11-5 after starting 0-3. So they're 11-2 over their last 13 games. And they are very much going to be a problem, especially that defensive line. They are going to be a problem for someone in the playoffs. I don't know if their offensive line is going to be good enough in those really tough defensive games. The Chargers don't quite have that level of defensive line. I'm trying to think of a defensive line that really would challenge them in the AFC. I mean, maybe Denver. And we saw that game play out. Houston could have won that game, even though C.J. Stroud got knocked out in the first half. Even with Derek Carr, they could have won that. Or not Derek Carr, with Davis Mills. That was 2 Texans quarterbacks ago. Even with Davis Mills, they almost beat the Broncos earlier this year. To be fair, the game was in Houston. This time around, probably will be in Denver, although we'll see how the Broncos and Chargers game plays out next week. Seattle goes into Carolina and just completely holds down this Panthers offense, 2.7 yards per play. Seattle wasn't great. They were good, not great. They turned it over twice. Sam Darnold just continues to be a turnover machine. Cannot trust him in a big game. But Carolina obviously had, I don't want to say they had nothing to play for, because if they would have won, they would have still, they would have basically clinched the West, or the South, excuse me. But it was obvious that Carolina is kind of gearing up for their big game, which will take place on Saturday against the Tampa Bay Bucks. The big upset of the day was in Cleveland. The Steelers could have wrapped up the AFC North. Instead, they got outgained by the Browns, and they lost by a touchdown as a field goal plus favorite, despite winning the turnover margin 2-0. Neither team converted a touchdown in the red zone. Pittsburgh looked awful offensively, absolutely awful. Aaron Rodgers looked old and slow. No DK Metcalf, which meant no downfield explosive threat. Everything was dink and dunk. They gained just 4.5 yards per play. I don't really trust this Pittsburgh team at all. I would say Ravens for me next week would be the play, but we'll see. A lot of time before that game. That'll be, by the way, game 272 next Sunday night. It'll be the Steelers and the Ravens. Saints go into Tennessee and get a win. 8.1 yards per play. Again, I feel like I pulled that number from the yards per attempt column. Let me double check that. No, that's right. I mean, again, just some insane offensive performances this week. Tyler Shuck looks like the real deal, man. I think he is, again, he outplayed Cam Ward. Flat out outplayed him. Tyler Shuck, second round pick, outplayed the number one pick, who's been starting all year, by the way. Whereas Tyler Shuck, I think he's only made 5 or 6 starts. Outplayed Cam Ward on the road. I think the Saints have something with Shuck. Now, to be fair, maybe Kellen Moore is just a really good coach, and he's making him look really good. And that could be true, but still, I would say Shuck right now is, I don't want to say rookie of the year because I don't know if he's played enough games, but the quarterback position definitely holds some weight. We'll go through all the awards markets a little bit later in the show, and I'll give you my thoughts based off what the odds are for a guy like Tyler Shuck. But, man, if he would have played the whole season, he is the lock for Offensive Rookie of the Year. But obviously he's only started a handful of games. So the receivers, McMillan and Egbuka, even Jackson Dart, I think, deserve a little bit more credit because they played more games. But Tyler Shuck, to me, in the short sample, he looks like the best rookie in the NFL offensively and definitely the best rookie quarterback. He has outplayed Shador. He has outplayed Cam Ward. So credit to Tyler Shuck and the Saints, man. Going on the road and just absolutely blasting the Titans. Plus 3.4 net yards per play. Really impressive. The Jags beat the Colts by 6. I don't know how they didn't cover this game. They almost doubled them in yardage, 5.4 to 3.7 in yards per play. 2 turnovers for the Jags. One of them was a really bad turnover late in the first half where Trevor Lawrence tried to hit a wheel route up the sideline with a linebacker covering Parker Washington, and he just butchered the throw. And then the other one was even a more dumbass turnover where they tried to run a hook and ladder play in the red zone. So the Jags still pushed some numbers. I think I think 5.5 was the close. I think they covered that. I gave out 6.5 earlier in the week and 6. So I gave it out at 2 different parts of the week. It was 6.5 at one part. I lost that bet. It was 6 at the other one. We pushed that. And then obviously if you bet the close on Sunday at 5.5 in that area, you would have won with the Jags. But they had no business not covering this game. I mean, they really held down the Colts offense, 3.7 yards per play, 2 turnovers. Rivers threw a really bad pick late in the game that I thought was going to be a pick 6 in the clincher for me to cover the spread. But credit to, I forget who it was, whoever was the receiver that made a nice tackle preventing the pick 6. And that turned out to be the cover play for the Colts because the Jags, who look like the real deal, Liam Cohen and Trevor Lawrence, like they look like the real deal. Defensively, they can play. He's a really good coach. I don't know if he's coach of the year, but he's in the conversation. And this Jags team, like, they look dangerous. You know, I mean, I think I feel the same way about them that I do Chicago. I just, they're unproven with a rookie head coach, but you got to like the quarterback and the weapons. And if the defense and the running game can show up, they can be a dangerous team in January. The Bucs do not look like a dangerous team. Even though they did outgain the Dolphins, they were a +8 net success. They lost by a field goal, and they were -3 turnover margin. Maybe they were, again, saving their energy for the Saturday game against Carolina, which really is the game. But if Carolina would have beat Seattle, which was unlikely, and they probably saw the box score about midway through the third quarter, and Seattle was up 2 scores, and they're probably like, all right, there's no point in us really playing hard here because it's all going to come down to next week. Maybe. But the Bucs, I think, are like 1-6 in their last 7 games. I mean, after starting hot, Tampa Bay has just completely fallen off the map. Our Baker MVP ticket, our Egbuka Offensive Rookie of the Year ticket, like it's all toilet paper now. Just a really tough final 2 months of the year for the Bucs, and my guess is Carolina wins that game next week and puts the final nail in. Speaking of the final nail, the Jets, holy shit. Patriots went full belt to ass, 42-10. Plus 22% net success. That was the widest margin of the week. They were 5 for 5 in the red zone. I thought at halftime, when Drake May was at 4 touchdown passes, I thought to myself, what is stopping the Patriots from just letting Drake May go crazy in the second half and getting this guy the MVP? I guess Mike Vrabel, the merciful, decided to call off the Dogs after May's 5th touchdown pass of the day. It was like midway, like late third quarter, I think early fourth. That was pathetic. The Jets are a laughingstock. They are the only team in the NFL without an interception. They are coached by a former defensive back. How does a former defensive back, defensive coordinator, coach for his former team and go a whole 17 weeks without one interception? It's almost unfathomable. And I know there's been a lot of reports that he's going to be back next year, Aaron Glenn. I think I said this on one of our first episodes, that he's the worst coach in the NFL. I'm pretty convinced of that still. You want to make a case for Pete Carroll. Not really going to fault you there, but let's be honest. Pete Carroll was always like a one-and-done placeholder. Like, the Jets hired Aaron Glenn to be the future, and it looks like an absolute train wreck. Now, the good news is they're going to get a top 3 pick, unless they beat the Bills next week somehow. And they might even get the number 2 pick. And Dante Moore, Fernando Mendoza, like, all those guys are in play. We'll see how it plays out. The Jets have very good draft status over the next couple of years because of the trades they made. I think they have 2 first-rounders in 26 and 3 first-rounders in 27. So the future is bright in terms of the draft situation, but I don't know if they have the right coach. And when I look at guys like Liam Cohen and Ben Johnson, it did not take very long. And I know Caleb Williams and Trevor Lawrence are light years ahead of what the Jets had at quarterback. But that doesn't count for what the defense are doing. That doesn't count for the game management and all the other stuff that's going on behind the scenes. It has nothing to do with the quarterback. Like, it is obvious that Aaron Glenn is in way over his head as a head coach. Way over his head compared to a guy like Liam Cohen and Ben Johnson who just, they picked it up like that. So the Jets have a problem. I don't know what the answer is because it seems like every time they do something, it turns to shit. But I don't think Aaron Glenn's the guy. And I think he's the worst coach in the league. I think after Pete Carroll will get inevitably fired come Black Monday in 8 days. I think Aaron Glenn's, who probably will get one more year because it's his first year as a head coach, and he'll probably get one more year because that's what all the reports are saying, even though the reporters are wrong all the time. I think he gets one more year, and man, if he doesn't turn things around next year, you cannot let him coach the team that has 3 first-round picks in 2027. They've got to have someone fresh in that spot. When they will, if they don't find their quarterback next year, they better find him in 2027. Because when you have 3 first-round picks and you don't get the best quarterback in a draft that'll have Arch Manning and Julian Sain and Jeremiah Smith, and I know Jeremiah Smith isn't a quarterback, but what if they get Arch and Jeremiah or Julian Sain and Jeremiah? Like, you need to have the right coach ready to roll. You need to have the Ben Johnson, the Liam Cohen, the offensive-minded guy ready to roll. And that is always my preference. If I'm hiring a head coach, I'm always choosing an offensive-minded head coach. Always. 100%. No doubt about it in my mind. Why? Because you're looking at the game from the right lens. You are looking downfield, whereas defensive coaches too much have the conservative gene in them. And they don't go for the throat because they don't have that offensive mindset, right? When you're on the offensive, like, just look up the word in the dictionary, compared to when you're on the defensive, like, just the definition of the word, the personality fits. Whereas you look at Ben Johnson, you look at Liam Cohen, you look at McVay, you look at Shanahan, you look at, all of these guys, LaFleur, they are aggressive to a fault. Whereas the defensive coaches, right, the Todd Bowles, those guys aren't as aggressive. I will say this, Mike Vrabel is starting to buck that trend. He's been pretty aggressive. But if you go back to his Titans days, he wasn't. He's gained some of that, I guess, analytical aggression over the last few years. And he's done a really good job with the Patriots this year. And they obviously went full belt to ass against the Jets today. I don't want to say game of the day because I think the Sunday night game was the game of the day, but the game of the afternoon was Eagles-Bills. This game was nuts. Very low scoring, but a very entertaining game. My biggest position of the week was on the under in this game, rocking chair winner. I just didn't see either team really extending themselves with their play calling and with their star players getting a lot of reps because they don't really have a whole lot to play for. Especially once the Patriots beat the Jets, and it was really now New England. All they have to do is beat Miami next week, and they're the AFC East champs. And then with the Eagles and the Bears, they need the Bears to lose twice and the Eagles to win twice in order to jump them. So again, the odds are Chicago was going to be the 2 because of the head-to-head, and the Eagles were pretty much locked into the 3. So obviously it could have gone the other way, and now that the Bears have lost and the Eagles have won, like the same thing could happen next week, and Philly could end up getting that higher seed. I don't think it will happen. I think the Bears will also beat the Lions, but it could happen. My point being, I just didn't see a lot of extension of talent. I didn't see guys like Saquon getting 1 million carries in that game. I didn't see Josh Allen, who was already on an injured foot, who injured his ankle also during the game, running it for 10 or 15 times. Like, we bet the Josh Allen rushing under props. That was a good wager for us. That ended up coming home. So a lot of unders in that game. Jalen Hurts only threw the ball for 110 yards. Saquon only had 19 carries, right? They ran it 50% of the time compared to throwing it 50% of the time. Same thing with the Bills. Josh Allen had 35 attempts, and the team had 33 rushing attempts. So it was a very run-heavy, conservative game plan for both teams. Neither team scored in the third quarter. The Bills almost won the game. They should have won the game. Allen had Khalil Shakir wide open in the back of the end zone. He just missed him. But a good bet for us with the under. And a good win for the Eagles, who are now 11-5. But, man, I am getting hosed with my win totals. Packers over 9.5. They've now lost 3 straight. They're probably going to lose this week to Minnesota, and I'm probably going to lose that. That was my biggest position of the offseason. Eagles under 11.5 and Bills over 11.5. That 1 2-point conversion that was missed today could have won both bets for me if Allen just hits a wide open Shakir in the back of the end zone. But, man, that is gambling. I'm probably going to lose all 3 of those final week of the year. I actually have like 5 or 6 win totals that are coming down in the last week of the year, which I guess is kind of why you bet them, because you want to have fun action. I won't have to bet as many individual games in Week 18 because of that. But I really would have appreciated Josh Allen finding Shakir in the back of the end zone today. That would have made my day a lot better. The night game was awesome. Brock Purdy is the real freaking deal, man. Remember when people were saying that, hey, maybe Mac Jones should stay the starter in San Francisco? I mean, people are crazy. They'll say anything to get on TV and to get, some attention. The ability for Brock to make plays outside the pocket is the reason why he is the starter over Mac Jones. Mac Jones understands the offense very well, and Shanahan loves him, and he's a tough kid. He understands where to put the ball in a tight windows, isn't afraid to throw it in a tight windows, can hang in the pocket, take the hit, but he's a statue. And the ability for Brock Purdy to get outside the pocket and make throws deep down the field, his scramble rate's higher, his success rate is higher, EPA per dropback is higher. All of the metrics that we look at that make a quarterback go from good to great are better for Brock Purdy. And that's why he's the starter in San Francisco. That's why he's a $200+ million man. That's why the Niners won the game tonight. I know their defense made the final play on the last play of the game, but that could have gone either way. The reason that the Niners were able to win this game tonight, Brock Purdy threw a pick 6 on the first play of the game and then was lights out for the last 59 minutes plus. Over 7 yards per play, 53% success rate, 5 for 5 in the red zone. And despite that turnover, and the Bears playing turnover free and gaining almost 7 yards per play, the Niners still won and covered against Chicago tonight. Obviously, the game flew way over the total. I would upgrade San Francisco, however. I would be weary about them in the playoffs because that pass rush, that lack of a pass rush, I think is going to be what costs them in a big game. All right, let's move on. Let's go to Week 18. Look-aheads and playoff scenarios. First, I'll give you the look-aheads here because we do have some numbers that are coming out, and I think it's important to talk about them. Let's start New Orleans and Atlanta. This game doesn't have much, and of course the Falcons. The Falcons still have a game to play on Monday night. I make the game 3.5. It's 2.5. If you like Atlanta, and again, I kind of like Atlanta a little bit based off of the fact that I make it 3.5, and we're sitting at 2.5, and 3 is a key number. If you think Atlanta battles tomorrow, I'd bet Atlanta now because my guess is if Atlanta covers or even just plays well against the Rams, there's a chance that line might hop to 3. So maybe a little baby nibble on the Falcons minus 2.5. Jets at Bills. I have no idea what Josh Allen's status is. I make the game 20. Obviously, I am really low on the Jets, like comically low, almost to the point where I'm probably too low. But the key is we just don't know what Josh Allen's status is. And I did see this line open at 14 and then get bet down to 11. So my guess is we just don't know if Josh Allen's playing. If Josh Allen plays, I'm betting the Bills. Period. End of story. You got to keep fading the Jets. They are a laughing stock, and you just have to keep fading them. Lions at Bears. I make this game 2.5. This is going to be a Sunday game. I make this game 2.5. Where is the line? It looks like it is right around 1.5, 2. I see a 1.5 and a 2.5. So yeah, so right around the number I make it. Probably won't play this one. Cleveland at Cincinnati. No playoff implications here. I make the game Cincinnati minus 8.5. It's 7. 7.5 at one shop. Maybe a little slight value on the Bengals, especially with the Browns coming off of their win. Cincinnati's been playing well. They have nothing to play for, so they've been playing well, but probably won't do much with that. Chargers at Broncos. I make the Broncos a very slender 1.5-point favorite, and the market hates that. The market makes it 7. Now, to be fair, my guess is there's some Herbert news that I'm unaware of, because this line was 3 last week. It opened at 3. So there's got to be something going on here with Herbert. There's no way the Broncos should be a full touchdown favorite against the Chargers. I have these two teams rated the same. So obviously if Herbert doesn't play, that would move the line around a touchdown. And then this number would make sense. So maybe there's some news about Justin Herbert that I'm unaware of now that the Chargers are locked into their wild card spot, right? They can't win the AFC West after they lost. Maybe they will sit Herbert, and it might make sense to sit him. The dude's basically a bionic man at this point with his various injuries in front of that offensive line. Probably a good week to get him some rest before they head into the postseason. So if you do see a shot that's a little bit light on Denver, maybe the market's kind of telling us that Justin Herbert's not going to play. Chiefs Raiders. I make this game basically a pick 'em, and the line is 6.5 with Kansas City favored by 6.5 at Vegas. How much does the market hate the Raiders? Holy shit. Now, I don't know if this is a Minshew number. There's no way it can be a Minshew number. I mean, a Chris Oladokun number. This has to be Gardner Minshew playing for the Raiders. Or playing for the Chiefs, excuse me. Yeah, I don't know, man. That is an insane number. For the Chiefs, if it is Chris Oladokun, a 6.5-point road favorite against the Raiders. That is wild. Wild number. Cannot bet the Chiefs. Again, I don't know who's playing quarterback, if Minshew's back from his knee injury, or if it's going to be Oladokun again. I didn't think Oladokun looked that great on Thursday. I thought, to be fair, the Broncos' defense is really good, but I thought he was just kind of, just doing the basic stuff. That is an insane number. I literally make this game a pick with Oladokun starting for the Chiefs. So I guess you got to bet the Raiders. Good luck with that. Arizona at the Rams. I make this 18.5. I'm really down on Arizona. I'm really high on the Rams. The market's 10.5. It opened 14. Obviously, what the Rams do on Monday night will matter a lot here. There's a chance that if they lose and they are locked into their wild card spot, that they will sit everyone. We know Sean McVay loves to rest his starters. I would not bet that game until the Monday night game is resolved and you know exactly what the scenarios are heading into Week 18. But you might get a really good look. Like, let's say the Rams win that game and they still have some playoff hopes alive for next week. I would be very interested in betting the Rams. Arizona's terrible. You saw what Cincinnati did to them today. Arizona is, I don't know what happened to Arizona this year. That needs to be studied with Gannon and all that firepower they have on defense, how bad they've been defensively this year. Green Bay at Minnesota. I make Green Bay a 4.5-point favorite, but this is Minnesota minus 6.5. Again, That Green Bay number is a Jordan Love number. He was close to playing this week, so I just kept his rating in there when I made the Packers rating this week. Maybe they'll rest him. The Packers have nothing to play for. They're locked into the 7th spot. However, they've lost 3 straight games. I did the research on this before I came on. There's only been one instance in the last 20-plus years, I think since 2003, which was realignment, that a team has lost 4 consecutive games heading into the playoffs. It's only happened once. It happened last year, ironically. The Steelers lost 4 straight. Remember, they started like 8-2, I think, and then they lost 4 straight heading into the postseason. Still made the playoffs, and then lost to the Ravens in the first round of the playoffs. If I'm Matt LaFleur, if Jordan Love can play, I'm playing Jordan Love. I do not want to take another L and have 4 straight losses heading into the playoffs. That is a death blow. Because the way that it's going to shake out, the Packers are going to be the 7 seed. Guess who's going to be the 2 if they beat the Lions this week? The Chicago Bears. Is there a more vulnerable 2 seed ever in the history of the NFL playoffs? Like the Bears winning tooth and nail on turnovers and grit and grind. The Packers can win that game. The Packers can absolutely go into Chicago and beat the Bears. But I do think they should at least give it their best effort this week and not just roll over and die, because when you lose 4 straight games heading into the playoffs, that feels like an omen. So I make the Packers a favorite in the game. They are a touchdown dog. To me, that says it is a no Jordan Love game, but maybe he'll start. Like, we don't know what LaFleur is thinking, so I would lean Packers there. In fact, if you can find a full 7, even with Max Brosmer going up against, to be fair, Malik Willis got hurt on Sunday night. So if it's Clayton Tune, then yeah, maybe a 7-point spread is worthy with that blitzing Vikings defense. But if Love plays, you got to bet the Packers as a dog, no doubt about that. And I don't think they will be a dog if Love plays. If it's Love versus Brosmer, you can't make the Vikings the favorite in that game. But to be fair, maybe J.J. McCarthy comes back. I don't know what his situation is. I haven't done the research there yet. Miami at New England. The Patriots need a win to clinch the AFC East. Oh, excuse me, no. Buffalo lost. New England has already clinched the AFC East. They are playing strictly for pride and maybe a Drake May MVP and Mike Vrabel Coach of the Year ticket. I make it 13.5. It's 10. I would bet New England. I would bet New England, and I would bet Drake May props, specifically first half Drake May props, but I think all Drake May props probably are fine because based off of what I watched today, I think Vrabel wants to give this kid the best chance possible to win MVP. And the voters are going to remember what they saw last. Last week he threw 5 touchdowns. He can do the same this week against the Dolphins, no doubt about it. Dallas at New York. If the Giants lose, they will lock in the number 2 pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. I make this game Dallas minus 4.5. It's 5.5. Probably not going to do much there. I don't know. Maybe bet the Giants because they're dumb enough to win another one of these games after beating the Raiders last week or this week, and getting themselves out of contention for the number 1 pick. I wouldn't be shocked if they beat the Cowboys and flip-flop with the Jets for the number 2 pick. That would be very Giant-y. Although the way the Jets roll, they'll probably win too. But that's unlikely unless Josh Allen sits. Washington at Philly. I make this game 17.5. Eagles, really, the only thing they have to play for is flip-flopping with Chicago. If they win and Chicago loses, Philly will be the 2. This game will be played at the same time as the Lions game, I believe, or as the Bears game, yes. It'll be played at the same time as the Lions-Bears game, so no competitive advantage there. Market makes it a 7.5-point line. I would probably bet Philly there. Josh Johnson is a touchdown dog. Ugh, no, thank you. Not with the way that Eagles defense is playing. I think listen, if today's any indication, the Eagles defense is back with Jalen Carter. And at least in the first half, that's the bet I'd make. I'd make Eagles first half because if the Lions are getting their ass kicked by the Bears, I wouldn't be shocked if the Eagles throttled down. But Sirianni, man, you got to give him credit. He goes all out. He goes all out. So I'm a big fan of Sirianni and everything he's done with the Eagles. It's been an impressive run for him. So I'd probably lean Philly there, especially in the first half. Baltimore at Pittsburgh. This, of course, game 272, the Sunday night game. I make this. How about this? I make the game Pittsburgh minus 3.5. It's Baltimore minus 3. That's how much respect the Ravens are getting in the market. To be fair, I haven't downgraded the Steelers as much as I probably should have today. I just downgraded them the 1 point. Maybe I should have downgraded them another full point, but even if I did, it still would have only gotten me to 2.5. So I'm clearly a little higher on Pittsburgh and maybe a little lower on Baltimore than I should. Although to be fair, oh, never mind. Excuse me. This is a Tyler Huntley number. I apologize. But also to be fair, I don't know if Lamar's 100%. So going from Tyler Huntley 100% to, let's say, 50% Lamar, that would probably be about a 4. Like, that's about a touchdown gap for me. Actually, let me look. Yeah, I make Lamar a 5 and probably Huntley a 4. So I would say it's at least a touchdown drop, 100% Lamar to 100% Tyler Huntley. But Lamar's not 100%. So maybe it's only a 6-point move. So let's move Baltimore from a -2 to a +4. Let's give Baltimore 6 points for Tyler Huntley to Lamar. And now I make that game 2.5 and it's 3. So that makes sense. So now but also, what if Lamar doesn't play? I think he'll play, but what if he doesn't? And that is obviously the big question when we're dealing with that game. But I think at 3, I would probably favor the Steelers +3, especially a +3.5 out there in the market too. I might even look at that. I don't trust the Ravens to be favored by that much on the road in an important game. No, sir. Seattle, San Francisco. This is the game of the week, obviously, for all the marbles in the NFC West. Looks like the line's a pick 'em. I make it a pick 'em. I think that's right. Niners deserve a point and a half for being at home. I think Seattle's slightly better in the ratings, but San Francisco's at home. I think a pick 'em feels about right here. It's going to be an awesome game. Same thing with Carolina, Tampa Bay. I have Carolina 2 points better than Tampa Bay in my ratings. So game is in Tampa, which means I make it a pick 'em. Tampa Bay's -3. I'd bet Carolina here. I really would. I think Tampa's just kind of lost it, guys. I think they've lost all the momentum. I think Carolina, if you're giving me a full 3 points with this Panthers team, again, Tampa Bay, to be fair, though, Tampa Bay was a 3-point road favorite a couple weeks ago. Now they're a 3-point home favorite. So I guess the market has caught up. So maybe I wouldn't run to the window to bet Carolina. Maybe I would hope for a 3.5. And it does look like there's some 3 -120 out there. So again, kind of leaning, right? The line's not quite, it's 3.25 is what we'd call it. It's not quite 3.5, not quite 3. It's kind of in between. Maybe we see a 3.5 pop at some point this week. That's when I would probably bet Carolina +3.5. Tennessee at Jacksonville. I make this 15.5. It's 11. I would bet the Jags. Coming off that weird game where they completely dominated the Colts, but only won by 6. I think they put pedal down. And especially first half, I would definitely bet Jacksonville here. The Titans are terrible, guys. The Titans are awful. They got rolled over by the Saints at home today. The Jaguars are going to do the same. And then finally, Houston against Indy. I make Houston a 15.5 point favorite, and the number is 10. I would bet the Texans. I think we got to keep fading the Colts. I don't know how they covered that game this week. I would absolutely keep fading the Colts because I love Rivers, man. It's an awesome story. But now you're going up against that Texans front. If you thought the Jaguars front was nasty, which they are, the Texans front's nastier. I just don't see how Rivers even moves it. To be fair, though, maybe they start Riley Leonard in this game. Maybe now that the playoffs are out of reach and everything is set, maybe they give Riley Leonard some run to see if he can handle himself and maybe move around a little bit with those legs and kind of slow down that Texans pass rush. Then I might feel a little bit differently about this game. But this does kind of feel like one-way action, belt to ass. I am not going to make any wagers on Week 18 just yet. I don't like betting Week 18 in the NFL. I will probably have one of my lower volume cards of the week. I might bet some contract incentive props. I've got to dig into that. I'll be honest, though, those contract incentive props don't have as much value as they did a few years ago. So I'm going to pat my back and toot my own horn. It's my platform. It's my podcast. I feel like I can. I OG'd that. Back in 2019, nobody was betting contract incentive props. I was. And then everyone started doing it. And then by the time we got to like 2023, 2022, 2023, all the value was gone. The books were aware that it was happening. They were dropping numbers later and later. The numbers were heavily shaded. Some of the numbers weren't even posted until like the day of the game, if at all. Every single content provider was putting out articles and videos about contract incentives. It was one of the most popular Twitter searches of the week and the final week of the year. And when everyone piles onto the bus like that, the value's gone. So the contract incentive wave was fun. I want to say 2 really good years, 2020 and 2021, where I cleaned house on those markets. And then it just got a lot harder to win. Kind of similar to the NFL draft. Honestly, exactly the same as the NFL draft, where the sports books didn't know what they were in for when they started making draft props widely available. And then they learned the hard way in 2020 and 2021. And then after a couple years of it, they started to throttle down, and the books either would not release the props until the week of, or they would make the windows really small and the limits really low. And it just became a lot harder to bet and win the draft. Same thing with contract incentives. And it's not to say that there's no value. There are situations where there is value, but you have to get a little bit more creative this year. And you also have to zig when everyone else is zagging. If everyone's betting the same prop in a relatively illiquid market at low limits, the market's going to get eviscerated. And then all of a sudden, it's either going to get taken down completely or the number's going to get bet up so high that all the incentive value is gone. So I think you have to be selective. I think you have to be creative. I think you have to read what everyone's writing and just bet on the guys that they're not writing about. Try to find guys that aren't being talked about a whole lot, that are flying under the radar. Maybe some milestones, right? Like the Drake May MVP thing. That's an angle. That to me is a little bit more bettable at this stage because it's just not as widely talked about. Contract incentives probably will be one of the most searched items in sports betting and fantasy and DFS this week. And when that happens, it's tough to say that there's value there anymore. You're just kind of following the masses, which is not an effective way to win betting the NFL. So that's my 2 cents on that. But I'll probably still have some degree of handicap for contract incentive, milestones, props, and more micro markets as we get closer to the end of next week. Maybe I'll even drop a Football Friday newsletter with some contract incentive stuff. Who knows? We'll see how I'm feeling come the end of next week. Of course, it's New Year's on Thursday, which means a lot of college football playoff stuff, which means a lot of other work and stuff like that. I'm also doing a show. The BetUS show got pushed back a day because of the New Year. So again, the last 2 weeks, like that time between Thanksgiving and New Year's is like a blur, man. I just want to get through this last week, get to the playoffs, take a breath, and be able to reevaluate where I'm at with my content as we push forward into 2026. But that is the Week 18 look-ahead lines. Hope you listened to that and gleaned a little bit of value. Couple of numbers I think I would be willing to attack now, but I think, especially with injuries and just the scenarios and how everything's going to play out, I am very hesitant. I am very conservative, and I'm very careful when I fire for Week 18 because it's just the most unique week of the year with just all of the moving parts going on. All right, let's go through the awards markets really quick, and let's see if we can't find any value here. For the most part, they're all kind of wrapped up, but maybe not. MVP, Stafford, and I'm pulling these numbers from FanDuel, by the way, because they have all of the markets up. You might find better numbers elsewhere, but these are the FanDuel numbers. MVP, Stafford, minus 250, Drake May, plus 200. Do I think Drake May can still win? Probably not. I think this market is priced correctly. I think the angle to play Drake May, if you think the Patriots are going to go full MVP mode next week and just let Drake May cook against the Dolphins, just play his props. Because I think if you're betting 2-1 for MVP, two things. A, you're at the mercy of the voters. And B, you got to wait 6 weeks. Whereas if I'm betting Drake May props next Sunday, the market's done, it's over, it's cashed, I win. And if he stays under his props, he's not winning MVP. The only scenario I'd possibly see him winning MVP is if he goes absolutely berserk. Another 300-yard, 5-touchdown day. And if that's the case, just bet his props. And you're going to win, and you don't have to wait a month, or you don't have to be at the mercy of the voters. But I think Stafford's going to win the MVP. I think it's a lifetime achievement award. He's never won it. He's had an unbelievable year. He was basically in a stretcher when the season started because of his back injury. Came from out of nowhere to have one of the best seasons of his career. And even though the Rams aren't going to win the division and the Patriots are, and they're probably going to be the 1 seed, I think you got to give Stafford the award. I really do. Coach of the Year is the best race of any award. I'll be honest. I have no idea who's winning Coach of the Year. You could make a case for Kyle Shanahan. You can make a case for Mike Vrabel. You can make a case for Mike McDonald. You can make a case for Liam Cohen. You can make a case for Ben Johnson, although a little bit lesser of a case after they lost tonight. But you can make a case for all 5 of those guys. Shanahan right now is the favorite at plus 130, but Vrabel's right there at plus 140. McDonald 5-1, Cohen 16-1, Ben Johnson 20-1. I understand why Liam Cohen and Ben Johnson are the long shots here, but the market does like first-year coaches. In fact, I think I can pull up the number really quick because I do research on this during every offseason, and it always blows my mind to see how many first-year coaches win this award. Hold, please. Play the music. Do, 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 do. Here we go. Coach of the Year. 13 of the last 36 winners have been first-year head coaches. 8 of the last 19 for the last 8. So the market really likes first-year head coaches. The voters really prefer first-year head coaches, and that's obviously Liam Cohen and Ben Johnson. I guess you could kind of say Vrabel's a first-year coach, but not technically. With his team, he is. I think that matters, but he's not technically a first-year head coach, so he wouldn't add to that streak if he does win. I think if I had to pick one today, I think it'd be Vrabel, because I don't think Drake May is going to win MVP, and I think the voters will still, like, if you're looking at the voting sheet, you get your AP voting sheet, right? You get to vote for Coach of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, AP, Offensive Player of the Year, all the AP awards. If you're looking at your ballot and you pencil in Stafford MVP, you have to remember this is a human award voted on by humans. So there is a human emotion element to it. If you're putting Stafford MVP at the top of your ballot, not Drake May, you might get Vrabel the sympathy vote for Coach of the Year, right? And I do think there is some balance to this, where if a guy, by the way, the MVP market's not cut and dry either. Like, there's some people out there who probably think Drake May deserves to win it, and that's very fair. But if you do vote Stafford, I would say you're more likely to vote Vrabel for Coach of the Year, because it's like, man, I was really close to voting Drake May MVP. I like Stafford more because he's got the tenure and he hasn't won it, but I'll give Vrabel the Coach of the Year nod. Like, I could see that dynamic playing out. So I think Stafford wins MVP. I think Vrabel wins Coach of the Year. And if Vrabel is going to win Coach of the Year, if there are markets out there that have him as a significant number 2 or number 3 guy behind a Shanahan or someone else, well, then there would be a little bit of value, I think, on Mike Vrabel. But at FanDuel, it's basically even. It's kind of a coin flip. Am I really going to bet a plus 140 for a market that I deem to be very coin flippy when I've got to wait another 6 weeks to find out who's going to win? No, obviously it's not worth the bet right now. But I think Vrabel does win the award. McDonald, they have to beat the Niners. But they're a pick'em in that game. And Mike McDonald's 5-1. But even if the Seahawks win, I still think Vrabel, who's going to be the 1 seed in the AFC, is going to get a lot of love. So if you already have a Vrabel ticket in your back pocket at like something like 5-1 or greater, then yeah, take some Mike McDonald. I think that'd be a decent bet. I don't think Liam Cohen or Ben Johnson are going to win it this year, but man, have they had good years. There is some really good coaching going on in the NFL right now. Arguably some of the best coaching that I've ever experienced. And it's young, offensive-minded, head coaches making splashes with their teams. To be fair, that's not Mike McDonald. That's not Mike Vrabel. But what Liam Cohen and Ben Johnson and even Sean Payton with Denver have done to elevate their situations, really impressive. Really good coaching happening in the NFL right now. Offensive Player of the Year, it looks like it's between JSN and Puka. Puka right now is plus 250. JSN's minus 200. JSN didn't have a great day today. I think he had like 8 catches for 70 yards or something like that. Like, it wasn't a terrible day, but it wasn't elite. If Puka Nacua goes bananas on Monday Night Football against the Falcons, I could absolutely see him continuing to get bet down to win this award. I would not be shocked if the AP award went Stafford MVP. Well, if he's the MVP, you got to give his pass catcher some love because clearly you got to throw it to someone. And Nacua has been the best receiver in the NFL, I think, this year in terms of his consistency, his route running, his versatility. He leads the NFL in targets and receptions. He's probably going to finish second to JSN in yards. And maybe that's why JSN wins. But I still, right, remember a few weeks ago when Nacua was like 16-1 coming off the injury. I was like, well, that number's crazy. Now he's plus 250. Is there a lot of value here? No, but I think Nakua's still got a shot to win it. However, the better bet to make is just to go over his props on Monday night. You don't have to worry about the voters. You cash right away, and you wash your hands of it. So I will likely be betting some Nacua props on Monday night. Not crazy, but just a couple of overs, probably receptions and yards, maybe an anytime touchdown. And I think he's still very live to win this award. I do not think it's open and shut. Not at all. Especially if JSN and the Seahawks lose to the Niners next week and Nacua has another big game against Arizona, the worst defense in the league maybe. I could definitely see Puka stealing this award over the last 2 weeks of the year. Comeback Player of the Year is done deal. Got to be Christian McCaffrey. He's a minus 2,500 favorite to win it. I just don't see any scenario where he doesn't. Same thing with Defensive Player of the Year. Myles Garrett obviously leads the league in sacks. He's going for the record next week. No doubt he is the guy. Offensive Rookie of the Year. This is a tough race. Tet McMillan's the favorite right now, but barely. Minus 105. Tyler Shuck plus 120. You got Travion Henderson 11-1. Egbuka 12-1. Jackson Dart and Genty's probably out of it, but I would say Dart's probably out of it too. I'll be honest. I don't think Egbuka's priced fairly here. I know recency bias matters, but him and Tet McMillan have pretty much the same amount of receiving yards. They're right at around 900-ish. They're facing each other this week. It's fair to expect Tet to have a better game because he's truly the number one receiver, whereas Egbuka's really like the third option. In fact, if you throw McMillan into the bunch, who's been really good lately, he's pretty much the fourth option, right? It's Godwin, Evans, McMillan, and then Egbuka. You want to throw Cade Otton in there. You got Bucky Irving. So there's a lot of weapons in Tampa, but Egbuka, what he did the first half of the year, like, you can't just forget about that. Like, he was the best rookie the first, I want to say, 6 to 8 weeks of the season. Then Baker got hurt. Evans and Godwin came back, and Egbuka obviously took a bit of a downturn, but it's not like McMillan's been running away with this thing. In fact, I would argue that Tyler Shuck, in his small sample, has looked like the best rookie on the offensive side. I just don't think he's played enough games. However, if he has 2 more really good games over his last 2 weeks, actually only 1 more game, he played really well today. If he plays really well again next week, I believe they face the Falcons, so not a terribly hard matchup. It is on the road, and the Falcons do have a good pass rush, but still gettable matchup. Maybe they do give it to Shuck, right? Quarterbacks tend to get a lot of love here. I think I've kind of got my hands up, right? We gave out Egbuka at 9-1 back in like October. I think it was like late September. I want to say it was week 4. I gave out Egbuka at 9-1. He's 12-1 now. I'm not going to really go crazy here because between Tet and Shuck, I don't know who's going to win. I really wish one of those games was happening on... Oh, no, it is. Saturday. You know what? Here's how I would play this. If you are an avid listener of this show and you have Egbuka 9-1 from back in October, here's what I would do. I would wait and I would watch Saturday's game. I would hope that the Bucs win. I would hope Tet has a bad game and Egbuka has a good game. Then I would bet Tyler Shuck before Sunday's game between the Saints and Falcons, if the market's still up by then. Maybe it won't be. Maybe it will. You can probably still take some Shuck anyways, because I think between Tet and Egbuka, I think if the Bucks win and if Egbuka plays even remotely well on Sunday or Saturday, I guess, I think Egbuka gets the nod over Tet. I really think right now it's Shuck and the winner of Saturday's game between the Bucks and Panthers and which receiver plays better on Saturday. I think that's what it is. So I'm not betting Tet at minus 105. That's a terrible bet. Shuck, I think, has, because he's the quarterback and he's frankly playing the best out of any rookie, I think he's got some upside. Whereas he plays another lights out game on Sunday. Maybe the voters just take that and take that to heart and use him as the guy. But I don't think Tate deserves to be odds on right now. I really don't. Him and Egbuka have the exact same amount of yards this year. I think Egbuka's got like 20 less yards. They've had pretty much mirror seasons of each other. It's just they've been different halves, right? Egbuka was good in the first half, bad in the second half. McMillan bad in the first half, good in the second. So I know recency bias matters, but I don't think it matters that much. So I think those two guys, I would say Egbuka should be a little bit shorter and McMillan should be a little bit longer. I think the pricing is off, but I already have an Egbuka 9-1. I'm not going to bet 12-1. I already have a 9-1. If anything, I'm going to bet Shuck. I think that's the guy who's got the most upside. Defensive Rookie of the Year, it looks like it's going to be Carson Schweisinger. He is a minus 900 favorite right now over James Pierce and Nick Emanwari, who have had good years, but Schweisinger's had a great year, linebacker for the Browns from UCLA. He's been fantastic this year. He deserves to win it. So there's your awards update. A lot going on there. A lot going on. I haven't had a great year handicapping the awards. Maybe we pull one out with Nakua. Maybe we pull one out with Egbuka. But it really hasn't been a great year. Remember last year we had Saquon, Offensive Player of the Year at 25-1. We had Coach of the Year for Kevin O'Connell at, I think, 25-30-1. We had two whopper tickets that were pretty much cashed by the time we got to this final week of the year. Unfortunately, that is not the case for us in 2025. But listen, you're not going to win every year in the futures market. Last year was a big cash for us in the futures market. This year, I'm down. Some bad breaks on some win totals, and we missed on a lot of our futures. So that's just the way it goes, man. You can't knock the process. You just have to get some things to bounce your way. All right, let's move on to the college football playoff. Woo! We have 4 massive games coming up this week. I'm going to go through each of them very quickly, and I'll give you some thoughts. I'll give you some bets to make, and hopefully we'll cash. All right, let's start with the Sugar Bowl. Actually, no, we'll go in chronological order. We'll start Miami and Ohio State. This is the New Year's Eve game. The Orange Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, Miami. I thought they were in the Orange Bowl because it's Miami, but it's not. Cotton Bowl, Ohio State, Miami. Big story here. Brian Hartline no longer calling plays. Ryan Day, for the first time in 2 years, will take over the play calling duties. That is interesting to me. I don't know if it's a positive or a negative. I just find it interesting. I definitely think it'll have an effect. I think Ryan Day has always had his hand close to the trigger of the play calling, but it's been 2 years since he's been the guy. I'm sure he's had plenty of time over the last month to prepare. I do think Ohio State's going to come off plenty pissed after their loss to Indiana in the Big Ten championship game. In fact, I think that loss probably woke them up a little bit. But let's be honest. Bain and Mesidor, 18 combined pressures against A&M. They were a problem in that game, and I think they're going to be a problem in this game. So the key here, Miami, 2.5 seconds or less, they can still get pressure on the quarterback. Second most pressure, second most sacks at 2.5 seconds or less this year. Julian Sayin, when throwing at 2.5 seconds or less, 80% completion rate. That's the 6th highest in the FBS. 8.0 yards per attempt. That's top 5 in passing grade. I can see a lot of max protect happening here with the tight ends. I can also see Miami continuing to get pressure despite that. Miami has arguably the best defensive line in the sport outside of Texas Tech. That's going to be the matchup to watch. Can that Ohio State offensive line protect Julian Sayin with the Miami defensive line being very elite? Miami's a very high blitz rate team. They came after Marcel Reed. 19 blitzes on 52 total dropbacks. That's 40% on their blitz rate. And I'll be very fascinated to see if Corey Heatherman takes his foot off the gas here. I don't know if you can really blitz Sayin, because if you do, you're leaving your corners one-on-one on the outside with the best receiving group in the sport. Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis. The tight ends can catch. I just don't know if you can really blitz at a high rate and leave one-on-ones on the outside. But I'm not Corey Heatherman, and he's a bit of a madman. So we'll see what the X factor is defensively for Miami. Ohio State's been very balanced recently. Bo Jackson, the running back, has taken the pressure off Sayin. True freshman, over 1,000 yards. Great year. Nearly 700 yards after contact. That is the most among Power 4 true freshmen this year. Buckeyes top 10 in run blocking grade. They mostly run inside zone or gap scheme about 74% of the time, a very downhill scheme. Miami's outstanding against the run, outstanding against inside run, inside gap, inside zone, top 20 against all those schemes. They just shut you down in the middle. In the 2 games Ohio State played against this caliber of defense, Indiana and Texas, the Buckeyes scored a combined 24 points in those games. And they were the only 2 games all season Ohio State didn't run it for 100-plus yards. This feels like a defensive battle between a really good defensive line and an Ohio State offensive line that, again, when they've managed up, they haven't been as physical as they have been in prior years. Last year, they just ran through everyone in the playoff. I don't think it's going to be that easy for the Buckeyes this year. With balance, though, they're unstoppable. When they're running it and they're forcing you to bring extra bodies into the box to stop the run, and then they're getting one-on-one matchups on the outside with their elite receivers, they're pretty much unstoppable. If you play back, light boxes to try to defend against the explosive pass, and Bo Jackson goes off, unstoppable. Again, you've got to pick where you want to go. And I think that's where Corey Heatherman is in a bit of a bind. On the other side for Miami, the offensive line is elite. 15th in run blocking grade, 25th in impact run block percentage. They move people off the ball. The Ohio State D-line, good luck moving them, especially in the middle. Big number 98, Caden McDonald, 6'3", 330. He makes everyone around him better. The Buckeyes, number 1 in a lot of the success metrics against the run. McDonald, Caden Curry's been great off the edge. Kenyatta Jackson on the other side. The matchup to watch here is going to be the right guard, Inez Cooper, the right tackle, Francis Mainaga, doubling up on McDonald on that right side. That is a Sunday matchup right there. All 3 of those players are going to be in the NFL. How much space can McDonald clear? How can the Miami blockers get to the second level if they're not able to push the D-line? Those are the questions that I have for Miami in this game. Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles, 2 more Sunday players. They're great at run fits. They see everything. They've got great instincts. This Ohio State defensive front, their front 7, I mean, I honestly think it's the best front 7 in the sport outside of maybe Texas Tech. You can make a case for both, but I'll be honest, this Ohio State team is really freaking good. The problem when you get pressure on Beck, he drops off a cliff with his production. So situationally, when kept clean, 58th in passing grade. Pressured, 112th. When not blitzed, 18th in passing grade. When blitzed, back down to 112th. If Ohio State can get pressure, it's going to be a long day for Carson Beck. Now, this hasn't been a big issue for Miami this year because their O-line does a really good job protecting, and Beck has a lightning-quick delivery. 2.32 average time to throw rate. That's the 3rd fastest in the FBS. Miami's only allowed a 16% pressure rate because of these 2 factors. When your offensive line is good and your quarterback gets it out fast, you're not taking a ton of pressure. No other team in college football has a 21% or better pressure rate. That's how good Miami's been. Their pressure rate's so good, no one's even within 5% of them. Ohio State's got a 40% pressure rate this year defensively, despite only blitzing at the 72nd rate in the country. So they're not blitzing a lot, but they're still getting a ton of pressure. Really good. On throws within 2.5 seconds, the Buckeyes 19th in pressure rate. Pretty impressive. If I'm Patricia, I would blitz more in this game, and I would make Carson Beck feel the heat. I'm not concerned with Beck beating me with his legs, right? When you blitz, sometimes you activate the quarterback's legs. That's something that Marcel Reed can beat you with, but not Carson Beck. Patricia's also really good at disguising coverages. Beck wants to be a distributor. When he's kept clean, he's very decisive. 2.16 second time to throw rate. That is blazing fast. So again, when he's kept clean, the picture is clear, the ball comes out quick. When he's pressured, he gets flustered, and the time to throw rate drops significantly to 3.38 seconds. Again, when he's clean and everything's nice and clean and crisp, the ball comes out quick. When you get pressure on him, he holds on to it, and that's when he takes the sacks and makes the mistakes. I really struggle to see Miami creating a lot of explosives in this game. Unless they can generate something on special teams, right? Maybe with Malachi Toney in the gadget and gizmo department. He's a really good player. But this Ohio State defense is the real deal. The Miami defense is pretty legit too. So I kind of see this as a defensive battle, but you can't just slam Mark Fletcher into the line of scrimmage like you did against Texas A&M and expect him to go off. It's not going to work like it did against the Aggies. You're going to have to be creative and explosive with the way you call plays, and I just don't see a whole lot of offense by either team in this game. Despite that loss to Indiana, the Buckeyes still haven't given up more than 17 points to anyone this year. So I don't see them giving up more than 17 in this game. And if they ain't giving up more than 17, that means they're going to have to score 30-plus in order for this game to go over the total of 42.5. So I think my best bet for this game is the under 42.5 and maybe a Miami team total under. But I could see this. I see this one being very much close to the best and a very defensive-minded game. All right, let's get to my favorite matchup of the week. It's Texas Tech and Oregon in the Orange Bowl. This is the early game on the early game on New Year's Day, which is Thursday. Right now, Oregon is a 2.5-point favorite, pushing 3. I like Texas Tech here. I'll be honest, I do. Dante Moore's got a case to be QB1 in the NFL draft. He can make that case if he performs well in this game. But this is like unstoppable force versus a movable object. This is going to be the most physical game, maybe of the entire college football season. I do trust Dante Moore more than Barron Morton. And that's what scares me about backing Texas Tech here. However, I like this Texas Tech defense a lot. Let's talk about the Oregon defense first. Very good at preventing explosives, especially explosive runs. Tech is mostly an inside zone team. They haven't been very effective in the second half of the year with this scheme, and they've leaned into a lot of gap and power recently, which is a lot of pulling guards, pulling linemen, pulling tight ends. The problem is when you run those types of schemes, you open up yourself to penetration, and that's where Oregon, especially those men in the middle, are very good at that, and their linebackers are great as well. But I really like this Texas Tech tight end unit. Terrence Carter, Giancarlos Miller, they're going to be a big factor in the run game. If you want to know where the ball is, look for the tight ends. Look for 7 and 9. Number 7, number 9. They're the lead blockers. They're averaging almost 6 yards per carry on gap schemes with an 18% explosive run rate, mostly using Carter and Miller as the lead guys, pulling up in a hole. So I think that's where Texas Tech offensively can maybe have a little bit of success. If those tight ends can be a factor not only in the run game but also in the passing game. The Oregon defense, though, they see a lot of these types of runs in practice because they run it themselves offensively. And just a 3.5 yard per carry allowed on gap scheme runs this year with a 6.5% explosive run rate. So Oregon defends this really well. Texas Tech wants to make it as easy as possible for this offensive line. It's not the most talented offensive line, but they're big, they're bulky, they're experienced. The Oregon linebackers are going to have to be really good in this game. Betcher and Mixon especially have to work laterally, right? Cameron Dickey, Jacoby Williams, the two backs for Texas Tech, they're very different, but if they can get around the edge on you, they can create explosives in those gap schemes, right? Dickey is more of the bruiser, 5'10", 215, stocky, yards after contact, where Williams is the burner, 5'10", 185. He's the guy that if he gets around the edge, look out. But Barron Morton's really the X factor here. 20 big-time throws from a clean pocket this year. That's tied for 6th among FBS quarterbacks, but he's had issues under pressure. 105th in passing grade, 0 big-time throws, 5 turnover-worthy plays. Texas Tech does allow just a 24% pressure rate on the year, 8th in the FBS. Oregon, top 40 across the board with their pressure rate and their pass rush grade. The key matchup to me, the tackles, Howard Sampson, Jacob Pontoon, against the Oregon defensive ends, Tuodi and Uiagalelei. Morton, to me, not a great improviser. He needs everything to be kind of like Carson Beck. He needs it to be on time, on target, clean pocket. If Oregon can force him into mistakes and get some pressure off the edge, that's where I think they can tilt the game in their favor. However, I don't know how Oregon's going to slow down this Tech defensive line. And that's crazy to think because the Oregon offensive line's been really good this year. Dante Moore is really good at getting it out quick. The pressure rate is low. He's a top 15 in passing grade and completion rate and big-time throws when throwing 2.5 seconds or less. So similar to Julian saying, it's 1, 2, 3, ball out. But Tech just gets after you, man. Second most sacks at 2.5 seconds or less this year. Only Oklahoma has more sacks in that category, but Oklahoma blitzes it way more than Tech does. Tech relies on their front four, and they just say, hey, David Bailey, hey, Romello Height, you've got 135 combined pressures and 22 combined sacks this year. Get after it. The interior is also really good. They can stop the run and get pressure. A.J. Holmes, Lee Hunter, those two combined 7 sacks, 61 pressures from the interior tackle spots. All 4 defensive line positions for Texas Tech are elite. And the one game Oregon lost this year, Indiana, they gave up a ton of pressure in that game, and Dante Moore was flustered. I think the Texas Tech defensive line is better than Indiana's, and that was in Eugene. This is on a neutral. I don't see Texas Tech's defensive line getting slowed down. The nastiest defensive line in the sport. Strength on strength here, the Oregon run game, best in the country against that Tech run defense. Oregon, first in rushing grade, first in EPA per rush, second in yards per carry. Texas Tech, first in run defense grade, first in EPA per rush allowed, first in yards per carry allowed. It's really remarkable how good both of these units have been this year. All 3 Oregon running backs above average rushing grades. Whittington, Davison, Hill, they all bring something different to the table. Linebacker Jacob Rodriguez for Tech might be the best overall player in the country. I heard a lot of OG ball diehards pushing for him to be at the Heisman podium. I don't know if that's worthy, but he might be the best pound-for-pound player in the country. He plays a linebacker position that doesn't get a whole lot of love, but he's unbelievable. Oregon is the number 1 gap running scheme in the country. Left guard, Emmanuel Pregnon, 6'5", 320, pulling up into holes. You got Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end. He's a freak. He can catch, he can run, he can block, he can do it all. This is going to be a nasty game in the trenches. I like Texas Tech plus the points. If I can get a 3, I love Texas Tech plus the points. My gut says the game stays under a high total of 52.5, considering how good these defenses are. I would say Texas Tech in the under. Those are my 2 bets for the Orange Bowl. All right, let's move on. The Rose Bowl between Alabama and Indiana. First matchup between these programs, maybe a battle for the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. I do think Simpson is a slightly better processor than Mendoza, but I haven't really studied Mendoza as much as I have Simpson this year. Bama's secondary is really good, but they've struggled to rush the passer. That's where I see Mendoza having a lot of success here. Just 6 sacks. 6 sacks against John Mateer last week, but Mateer was holding on to it way too long. Mendoza, again, very quick processor. He will get the ball out much quicker. Kane Womack's really good at disguising coverages. He knows he can't rush the passer, so the only way that you can just disrupt the passer is to confuse him. QBs, again, will stall. They'll pass up their first read. Over the last 3 games, Bama has disguised 78 coverage snaps, and that number has increased throughout the season. Keon Sabb, Bray Hubbard, Zabian Brown. Those are the 3 guys in the secondary for Bama. They're going to be flying all over the field, safeties up, rock and rolling, corners back. They're going to be moving pre-snap, post-snap, doing their best to disguise Mendoza. Fernando, though, has been elite at solving defenses this year. 2nd in passing grade, 8th in yards per attempt, 13th in accurate throw rate, the 23rd fastest time to throw rate at 2.5 seconds. He's sharp, decisive, and quick with his delivery. The pick 6 against Oklahoma that Bama had, that was a disguised coverage. The only chance I think Bama has to win this game is if they get inside Fernando Mendoza's head, show him something pre-snap, roll to something else post-snap, and make him hesitate when he is clicking through his reads. We're going to find out if Mendoza has an NFL mind. This is going to be a really tough test against a very disciplined and I'll call it mysterious Kane Womack defense. Indiana's run game, it's mostly zone, duo, and man. They're top 10 in EPA per rush, top 10 in rushing grade, top 10 in blocking grade. Hemby, Black, Martin, the 3 backs for Indiana are all very effective. Bama linebacker Justin Jefferson played one of his best games of the year against Oklahoma. But teams have had success running it right at this linebacker group. Hubbard also has been a little bit weak in the tackling department. he's like a bat out of hell. Like, he'll come flying from the safety spot into the box, but sometimes he overruns things, and sometimes he can play a little bit too fast, too over his skis, and that's where those cutback lanes can sometimes be available, and Indiana loves to run those zone schemes where they'll stretch you, foot in the ground, plant it. That'll be the vibe, I think, for this game with Indiana trying to run it. The one thing that's hard to run it against Alabama, their defensive tackle, Tim Keenan, is a beast, and he is all over the field. How the center, Pat Coogan, matches up against Keenan, they're going to probably double team him with some duo looks. That's going to be an interesting matchup as well. Can Indiana get anything inside the guards, or does everything have to be outside zone, outside gap, outside counter? Can they get any push in the middle against Keenan? I would say no, because Keenan, I think, is the best defensive tackle maybe in the sport. But Indiana runs it really well, and they scheme things really well. So we'll see. Maybe we'll get some traps. It'll be very fascinating to see the center like to pull him a little bit, how Indiana's going to play that inside running game. But if it's just outside, that's where I think Bama has a bit of an edge, because you're not going to run outside the Bama linebackers. Like, they're fast. That's SEC speed. You're going to have to counter them, gap them, zone, stretch, foot in the ground, plant up. So I do think Indiana might struggle a little bit to run it on Bama, especially if Tim Keenan can play a good game. For Alabama offensively, huge edge for Indiana in their run defense against the Bama rush offense, which has been basically non-existent. Indiana third in run defense grade, 14th in yards per carry allowed, 5th in explosive run rate allowed, 2nd in TFLs. Mikal Kamara is their best player, the edge rusher. Big injury, though, at the other spot. And this is where maybe I think Alabama might have a bit of an edge here. Stephen Daly, who's tied for the FBS lead with 19 tackles for loss this year, suffered a knee injury while celebrating the Big Ten championship. That's a huge loss if he can't play. They're going to need the linebackers, Aiden Fisher, Isaiah Jones, Elijah Hardy. They're going to have to step up. Those three linebackers have combined for 56 pressures and 17 sacks this season. So if Daly can't go, those linebackers have to elevate their game, because Daly's a huge piece on that Indiana defensive line. Alabama can't run it well. One explosive run for 30 yards against Oklahoma, then 33 yards on 20 other carries. I don't think Alabama has to run it at an elite level in order to win this game, but they have to keep Indiana honest. If they can't reel off, 5 to 10 successful runs, and when I mean by successful, between 4 and 8 yards, more would be great, but if you are running and setting up 2nd and short, 3rd and short, if you can get the first down on 3rd and 2 with a run, and you can keep the chains moving, keep the Indiana defense honest, I think that's where Alabama's run game doesn't have to be great. It just has to be average. You just have to keep Indiana honest. And I think that's where Ty Simpson, who maybe has finally turned a corner against the blitz, can be a little bit more effective. So Simpson had a below average passing grade against the blitz in 7 of 14 games, but was above average against Oklahoma in the CFP. Indiana, about a 50% blitz rate this year. That's a top 15 rate in college football. They do a good job disguising coverages. Simpson's really good at isolating those one-on-one matchups, but Indiana runs a very zone-heavy scheme, which means you have to identify windows and then throw into the open windows. What kind of hot adjustments can Ty Simpson make, and will he be able to find those open windows while also navigating the run game and trying to keep Indiana honest on the ground? Tough task. I think at 7, I like Bama. I think at 6.5, it's probably a stay away. Do I think Bama has the goods to keep this close? Absolutely. But I'll be honest, I've been really heavy on Bama this year, and I don't want my hubris and my love for the Tide to blind me from how good Indiana's been. The best story in college football in terms of coaching that I've ever seen. Kurt Cignetti is a wizard. He will have his team ready for this game. They're not just going to roll over. They're not just going to play soft. But Alabama catching a touchdown against an unproven Indiana team, and when I say unproven, I mean we haven't seen it at this level. They made it to the playoff last year. They got bounced in the first round. They really didn't even show up for that game against Notre Dame. Now they've taken it a step further. Undefeated season, Heisman Trophy, quarterfinal, number 1 seed, undefeated, all that good stuff. But we haven't seen them at this level. We have never seen them in a playoff before have success. So it's fair to question it. At Bama, at 7, I would take Bama. I think at 7, you bet Bama and you just hope for a good game. And maybe Indiana still wins, but Bama covers. But I think at 7, I'm taking the points with the Tide. All right, Sugar Bowl, final game. Georgia versus Ole Miss. Georgia, this is, of course, the only rematch of the quarterfinals. Georgia won the first matchup 43-35 back in October. They covered as a 7.5-point favorite. Game flew over the total of 57.5. It was Gunnar Stockton's best game of the year. Georgia went the entire game without punting. I doubt that will happen again. I expect this to be a more defensive game than the last one. There's something about Kirby Smart in rematches. It's a thing. Look at what happened to Alabama this year. They went into Athens, played really well offensively, won the game. SEC championship game a few weeks ago, couldn't do a damn thing. So Kirby Smart making adjustments, making your life harder in the second matchup, especially the same season, that's a real thing. Georgia's offense, very horizontal. They're good at yak. They're good at attacking outside the numbers. Design rollouts, right? Deep crossers. Zachariah Branch screens, yards after catch. Oscar Delp, Lawson Lucky, the tight ends are really good. This is a big, physical offensive line that loves to run it. Gunnar Stockton leads the nation, actually, in adjusted completion rate outside the numbers. 5th lowest ADOT, just at 8 yards. So what that's telling me is he's not pushing it vertically, but he's very effective at throwing it outside the numbers. Horizontal play action, design sprint outs, bootlegs, screens. That's the vibe for this Georgia offense. And, oh, by the way, they're going to slam it down your throat as well. Ole Miss, I think, is solid at corner. They're not elite. They struggle a little bit in zone coverage to diagnose the crossers. So that's where I think Georgia can have some success here. Ole Miss has to protect the perimeter. The pass game for Georgia is designed to complement the run game. Run it down your throat, play action, bootleg off of it, horizontal yak throws. That, to me, is the Georgia offense in a nutshell. Can Ole Miss defend inside zone? Georgia was much more physical in the first game. They ran for 224 yards. 100 of those yards came on inside zone runs. Georgia averaged 5.6 yards per carry on inside zone. The D tackles, Harris and Eccles, really struggled against the O-line for Georgia. The linebackers are going to have to be really good at fitting. They had no answer for inside zone in the first matchup, and Georgia loves to run that scheme. The best running plays for Ole Miss in the first game was Trinidad Chambliss. So they could not run it with Kejuan Lacey. He was held to 31 yards in the first matchup. As a team, they only gained 19 yards before first contact. Can the Ole Miss O-line get any push? Are they tough enough to hold up? I would lean to the no. That Georgia defense playing really well. Trinidad Chambliss in this game, it was week 8, season low passing grade, season low completion rate. Georgia ran a 40% rate of man coverage in that game. Way more than normal for them. Chambliss is really good against zone this year, struggles against man. His passing grade dips from top 10 to outside the top 60. The Ole Miss receivers are going to have to prove they can separate from man coverage. Chambliss is going to have to make throws into tight windows. Ole Miss had 199 yards of yak in the first game. That is a strength for them. Stribling, Wallace, Lee, Alexander, very dangerous weapons. But again, Chambliss really struggled to fit it into those man windows. He was just 2 of 11 on throws 10 or more yards down the field. He's been one of the best deep passers in the country this year, but Ole Miss really shut him down. Georgia really shut Ole Miss down. Can Georgia figure out a way to do that again? Can Ole Miss hit any home runs against this Bulldogs defense? Or is it going to have to be dink and dunk and dink and dunk, and at some point Ole Miss is going to make the mistake? This Georgia defense is red hot. 4 straight games allowing 10 points or less. I really think this game will come down to quarterbacking, who can handle the pressure, and can Chambliss elevate his ability to find open receivers in tight man coverage. Trinidad Chambliss has been one of the best stories in college football this year. This dude was playing at Ferris State last year at the D2 level. He is now about to play Georgia in the Sugar Bowl with a chance to go to the college football playoff semifinals. Awesome story. But I think Georgia's better. Obviously, I've given you Georgia to win the championship several weeks ago when the playoff bracket came out. I still think Georgia is my pick. I think it's going to be Georgia beating Ohio State in the semis. I think it'll be Indiana and Texas Tech in a war in the other semifinal. And then I think Georgia will make it to the championship game. And let's say Texas Tech, just for shits and giggles. But I wouldn't be shocked if Indiana was in that game. But I think Georgia's the best team in the country this year. I think they are mentally stronger than everyone else. And physically, they ain't so bad either. So a bet for this game, I think it's Georgia and the under. I see some 6.5s out there. I would bet Georgia minus 6.5, and I'd bet under 55.5 for Georgia and Ole Miss. All right, before we finish, let's wrap up the show as we normally do. I don't have a rise and whine for you today. I don't really have anything to whine about. We talked about tanking last week. I guess I could talk about that again. I nailed it last week. I mean, did you see what the Raiders did this week? Max Crosby, Jeremy Chin, Brock Bowers. Yikes. Yeah, tanking in the NFL is a real thing, but it's not done during the week. It's done. It's not done on Sundays. It's done during the week. Forget about that. We're not doing Rise and Wine this week. I don't have anything to complain about. I do, however, have a morning glory, an actionable element for you. It is the Birmingham Bowl on Monday. Georgia Southern versus Appalachian State. We are betting Georgia Southern minus 7.5. Conference opponents in the Sun Belt. These teams played each other on November 6th. Georgia Southern won by 2 as a 5-point road dog. The game stayed way under the total of 61. So just 7 weeks later, the spread has moved over a touchdown towards Georgia Southern. If you assume this game would have been maybe App State minus 2 on a neutral back then, this game has now moved 7 full points. Actually, more like 8.5 full points. Why? Well, opt-outs. App State, without their top 2 quarterbacks, A.J. Swan started the first matchup between these teams, threw for 348. It will be either freshman Noah Gillen or journeyman Bill Wiles starting for App State in this game. Woof. Wiles at least has some experience starting for Southern Miss back in 2023, but neither are good options. App State also without their leading receiver, Jaden Barnes, who had 160 receiving yards in the first matchup between these teams, and one of their main running backs also questionable with injury. Several other skill guys also questionable. This was a really tough situation for App State. They didn't find out they were even going bowling until December 8th. They're one of those 5-7 bowl teams. They found out late they were in this game. Their roster is a disaster. Meanwhile, Georgia Southern, 4th straight bowl appearance under head coach Clay Helton, but they're 0-3 in their last 3 bowl appearances. I think Georgia Southern gets off the schneid. Give me the Eagles, minus 7.5. Morning glory in the Birmingham Bowl on Monday. Helton gets his first win as a head coach of Georgia Southern in a bowl game. Congratulations. You heard it here first, unless it doesn't happen. All right, that's going to wrap up episode 14 of The Morning After. Don't forget, subscribe to the newsletter, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us on socials. For your host, Jared Smith, if you learned anything, if you laughed, if you cried during this show, you have to subscribe. You have to continue supporting the content. Don't forget that the like button on your way out. We will see you in 2026 on The Morning After.